Once my team is ready, please, I will. Thank you very much. Thank you, dear colleagues, for coming to this press conference, very important press conference. I want to thank the live stream team that gives the opportunity to the world to follow us here live. And I want to welcome Dr. Joseph Chilengi, Presiding Officer of the ECOSOCC, who will be addressing you on the impact of sanctions on the human rights of women. So let me just quickly give Dr. Chilengi to introduce the subject matter, and we will take questions. Excellency, you have the floor.
Thank you so much, moderator, dear colleagues from the media. Thank you for coming. You are all aware that this 27th ordinary session of the African Union is discussing very important issues that relate to Africa's cooperation in global affairs. One of the two issues that we are going to discuss with you and share with you is on the impact of unilateral cohesive measures on the human rights of women and children, with particular focus on the situation in Sudan. And we will also highlight the current debate on ICC and Africa's cooperation. These are matters that the summit has seized itself of, but I think it's very important to give you our perspective as an organ. The Economic, Social and Cultural Council of the African Union, as you are aware, is an organ of the African Union. In simple terms, it is the civil society parliament of the Union. Firstly, the issue of ICC, many of you have been following, that Africa and the world have been debating on various issues relating to the cooperation of Africa with the International Criminal Court. I wish first to take this opportunity to thank the African Union and all its institutions and organs for having resolutely taken up this matter to ensure that the International Criminal Court is designated as an international criminal court for international justice system, other than what many perceive it from that perspective. I want to mention that human rights and justice are an absolute requirement for Africa and Africans, just as they are worldwide. Just as many parts of the world, not only Europe, human rights issues and problems are there. But Africa must be realistic. However, much of the Europeans would want to seek to force their institutions, such as the ICC, upon Africa. It is clear that ICC is part of the problem of the international justice system, other than a solution. The UN Charter espouses very clearly the universality of human rights. In order for us to move towards a solution of human rights as recognized globally, the case for justice, therefore, is very important. But the fact is that, and the reality is that, ICC and its behavior is damaging the international justice system and raping international justice. The facts are very clear. ICC claims to be an international court. But from the African perspective, we view it as not being such as at now. We view it as a court that represents perhaps 1/3 of the world's population, while we have the USA, Russia, China, and countries such as the world's largest democracy, India, are not members of the ICC state parties. Secondly, the ICC claims to be an independent court. Our argument is that it is not. Why? The ICC gives the world's most political body, the UN Security Council, special prosecutorial rights of referral and deferral over its activities. Secondly, or additionally, the European Union, through its constituent parts, provides over 70% of the ICC's budget, something which also violates the Rome Statute, which says that no one member state can pay more than 22% of the budget, and as we know, he who pays the piper calls the tune. Secondly, this is why no European, no NATO, no North American soldier or politician will ever appear before the ICC. This is why allegations of war crimes, crimes against humanity on a massive scale in Iraq, Afghanistan, and elsewhere continue to go unpunished. The ICC promises to end impunity, and the impunity, yet it has accorded legal impunity to US forces and allowed impunity for the forces of states that are allies to the United States of America and Europe. The ICC has promised to end immunity, but it has also promised to be a court of excellence. The reality is that it has failed any practical test. As a court, the court has been caught up in procedural irregularities, including allegations of hiding exculpatory evidence and witness tampering. And the latest one is about one of the judges, Gomede, who is alleged, and there is a complaint to that matter, to have received millions of dollars in an offshore account in order to falsify information on the prosecution of President al-Bashir of Sudan. I will provide with you documents from State Department that has now come out that the grounds that were used to prosecute al-Bashir were actually false. These are State Department. These are confirmation declaration in the courts of the United States of America by two Americans. One of them was the ambassador of the USA in Sudan. Every more disturbingly, it has appointed more judges meant to deal with very complex legal issues. Meanwhile, those judges at the ICC have never been lawyers in their countries. Most of the judges at the ICC have never been lawyers or judges in their countries. And you can't sit on a bench if you don't qualify to be sitting on the bench at national level. In other words, we are saying, as a FIFA analog is also in mind given the recent allegation of senior ICC judges that have had millions of dollars passed through their offshore accounts. To extend the FIFA analog, if true, this means that the ICC has gone past fixing the venue of the World Cups and on to match fixing. ICC is not for Africa. Not only is its African own focus racism unacceptable, but it's also caught up in persistent allegations of corruption and dysfunctioning. Africa, therefore, our argument is very clear that international justice system must be perfected. The ICC is the last court of appeal. And therefore, the establishment and the extension of the powers to the African court to include war crimes and genocide and international crimes, in short, is meant to perfect the international justice system. Because as a citizen, if you are indicted by the ICC as the first and last court, after that, there is no appeal. Where do you appeal? everyone must be given an opportunity to be heard 2 or 3 times. That's what the justice system says. So the African court, with extended powers of international crime, is meant to provide that perfection to this wrapped and dysfunctional international justice system, where we all have the ICC as the first court and the last court, and you cannot appeal anywhere. And if you can't appeal, that justice system is considered dysfunctional. There is allegations that, for example, Sudan, president is indicted by the ICC on allegations of war crimes. Secondly, you also have a country like Sudan under sanctions, unilateral coercive measures. Now, the international human rights system, including the UN Human Rights Council, has given out various communications that unilateral coercive measures are illegal in international human rights law. They are illegal in international law because you cannot apply sanctions unilaterally unless with the consent of the United Nations system and other bodies that provide international protection. Now, the United States of America has provided an illegal system of supporting the application of unilateral coercive measures on Sudan. For the last 30 years, and let's take it this way, these sanctions were imposed 30 years ago. The population of Sudan now is at about 60, 70 million. 70% of the Sudanese population is made up of the youth, young. It means they were all born after sanctions were imposed. And they are suffering the consequences of these unilateral coercive measures for which they were not a party to the problem. They were not there. And even just simple justice system clarifies that if my father is wrong, I cannot be prosecuted for sins alleged committed by my parents. Sudan now, this population of youth cannot access efficient education system. They can't access medical services. Babies are dying because hospitals cannot provide medicine. So, is that not crime enough? And the international system also says, and I want to quote a few things, that if a country decides to impose unilateral coercive measures, it must also be responsible for the consequences. That's what the international human rights system says. The USA has not. Now, we have these 2 documents here. There are 2 confessions. This one was in the United States District Court, District of Columbia. It's a declaration by a Mr. John E. Clonan. Mr. Clonan has provided evidence that the reasons that were forwarded by the USA government to indict Sudan and its leadership was also supporting terrorism were not true. This is a confession. This, you have an opportunity. The second one is from Mr. Timothy Michael Carney from their security system, but was also ambassador to Sudan. I want to read quote him just on one page. It's a declaration in the court also. This one is also in the District of Columbia. I believe, I quote, I believe that the United States' failure to respond to Sudanese offer in fighting counterterrorism efforts was due partially to 40 United States intelligence that had inaccurately attributed anti-United States intentions. For example, I know that more than 100 United States intelligence reports, most of which date back to so many years, some of which allege that elements of Sudanese government planned action against United States personnel in Sudan were exaggerated and fabricated in early 1996. Those reports, though ultimately discredited, nonetheless established an atmosphere with such similar allegations, where such similar allegations were credited without sufficient information. This is, again, a confession by a very senior United States official. Now, this in itself is the cause of why, with us in Africa, you need to listen to us very well. When we argue on anything, it has been sufficiently analyzed with both internal and external political implication and consequences to the continent. You take Libya, for example. They went in, bombed Libya, and left Libya the way it is. If they had listened to Africa formula we had for Libya, Libya would not be where it is now. They did the same for Iraq. They did the same for many other countries. I am speaking on behalf of civil society. I sit with the leaders in their discussions. They mean well. The only problem we have is that there is a gap on information on why certain decisions are taken. And we blow them up because they are from Africa. If these confessions were from an African, by this afternoon, we would have an warrant of arrest being perpetuated by those from the West. Thirdly, there is now an attempt, and Africa rejects that. There is an attempt to amend the Rome Statute so that the UN blue bellets, UN forces, peacekeepers, must have the powers to arrest our leaders when they are wanted by the ICC. What's that? Where is the sovereignty of our state? How can you have soldiers, you just send them into a country and say, go and arrest that one? What is more confusion? So understand Africa very well. We mean well for the continent. We mean well for this global community. And we mean well in our actions in order to perfect, especially the justice system, in all its regard. In January, I wrote a letter to President Obama analyzing the illegality of coercive measures that have imposed on Sudan. It's a developed world. He has never responded. Maybe when Trump comes, he may respond. We'll wait for that. Thank you so much.
Okay. We've listened to you, Dr. Joseph Chilengi, Presiding Officer of the ECOSOCC. We'll now open the floor for question, please. Any question? Let's have the microphone. You present yourself, your press organ as usual.
Thank you so much, Excellency, Doctor. My question, I'm Pascal Buhura, I work for Rwanda Broadcasting Agency. My question is, we've always heard these words condemning ICC. We've heard some statements from our leaders. But my question still is, what are we doing? What are we doing to really put this into practice? What is Africa doing to make sure that what they are complaining about is being worked out? Thank you so much.
Yes, thank you. Let's bring it right in front and then that. Let's go straight to the questions, please.
Thank you very much. My name is Edmund Kajiri. I work for the East African newspaper. Mr. Chilengi, when we talk about Africa leaving the ICC, in most cases you don't give us the alternative forms of justice that would probably replace what ICC was doing, because certainly there's a need to hold people accountable, there's a need to stop impunity. So what other forms of alternative justice do you give Africans? And also, have you taken time to look into some of these accusations to provide a report to rebut probably these accusations leveled against Sudan and President Bashir? Thank you very much.
Thank you. Just pass on the mic on your right, please.
Thank you very much. My name is Collins Moy. I write for the New Times Daily. I have brief questions, and to Dr. Chilengi, I would like to know, as he asked, what alternative justice mechanisms does ECOSOCC and African Union call for? And still on the same, are you calling for a justice system mechanism only for Africa, or for a global one, but with the aspects that you're calling for? Then, and lastly, in regards to withdrawing from the International Criminal Court, the 34 countries, what lobbying are you conducting to ask countries to withdraw from the ICC? And to Dr. Mohammed from Sudan, if you can tell us to what extent have the sanctions affected your country's development, or slowed down your country, or to what extent have they hurt your economy, to what extent have they hurt your growth, your social affairs? Thank you very much, including health.
Thank you. Let's first respond to those questions, then we can take a second round, if you don't mind. Do you think we should go with the responses? Okay, yeah, thank you.
I think we can. Then I'll give my colleague to give you that statistical issue. What are we doing as Africa on the strategy on the ICC? Our number one strategy is to have a regional court that has the powers to try international crime, so that any dissatisfaction at regional court, then the ICC becomes an appellant court. You understand us there? Further, there are countries now that are also, their courts are also having mechanisms to try international crime. So if there is dissatisfaction at national level, then the regional court becomes the appellant. If not satisfied, then the ICC becomes the last court. Perfect justice system. That's what we are looking for, and that's what we stand for. In terms of strategy, there is an open a ministerial committee that the summit has established, which is headed by the foreign minister of Ethiopia, Minister Tedros. And they have been given specific instructions by the summit that they develop a strategy. Among this strategy, first and foremost, and you have to hear us very well, they have been moving all over the world, consulting and putting Africa's position on how to strengthen the international justice system, including the UN Security Council. This is from Africa. This is what we have on the table. We are giving time limit. If we don't get a feedback, then we act on our. You understand? We have a strategy. One of it is withdrawal, of course, but the withdrawal is also delegated to the sovereignty of the member states. There will be a general agreement that we pull out, but states using their sovereignty can begin their national actions to withdraw. There has been an argument that the AU is not a state party to the ICC and therefore cannot call for a withdrawal. But some of you understand basics of international law. Now, customary international law, international organizations and multinational organizations are also elements of international law. That's why the UN has so much to do with the ICC, because they're an international organization. So international organizations are subjects of international law now. There is no argument there. That's what the law says. International organizations and multinationals are subject, and therefore they have authority to say what they want to say. Our alternative system is that we have the protocol to expand the powers of the jurisdiction of the African Court on Human and People's Rights to include international crime. And ratifications have begun. Our system requires at least a minimum of 15 states, for it to take effect. So that in itself provides the avenue as an alternative for Africa. And we have looked into the accusations against President al-Bashir. And we found them this way. That the allegations are not meant to address judicial justice. The allegations are meant to address political justice by those ones that have political interest on Sudan. You will read for yourself here, so I don't want to speak much on that. So the withdrawal is part of our strategy, but with your permission, moderator, let me ask comrade here to respond to the issue of sanctions and the effect and whatever. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Chilengi. Concerning your question, the sanctions have a very negative impact on the Sudanese economy in general because they put limitations on the economy. They were meant to isolate the country from trading freely with the outside world because the OFAC, or the Office of Foreign Asset Control in the Department of Finance in the United States, is putting penalties on banks that deal with Sudan, with ships that deal with Sudan. There are many banks that are penalized millions of US dollars. So it is like the country is not able to deal freely with the outside world. Sudan used to be number 1 or number 2 in the area in attracting foreign direct investment. But many companies have to pull outside the Sudan because of the penalties. So all the economic sectors, the agriculture, industry, transport sectors are greatly hit by those sanctions. Even the HIPIC, the International Initiative for Lifting Debts from the Third World Countries, there was an initiative called HIPIC, Heavily Indebted Poor Countries. But because of these sanctions, the United States did not allow this initiative to waive debt from Sudan. Now the international debt in Sudan is almost half the total GDP of the country. So it is like putting the country under siege because of those sanctions.
Okay, thank you. Let's take a last round of questions, please. The microphone. Yes, where is the microphone? I want the microphone. Start with him. There.
Okay.
And then you'll come this way.
Thank you, Dr. Joseph Chilengi, and for your articulate stance regarding the ICC. And I think most of what you say is absolutely right, and most Africans support you. My question is relating to the exit strategy. Could you elaborate on that and tell us what exactly is the end game? What will you do? And I have an additional question which might not be directly linked to the subject. There is, I don't know if you know the issue of the Chagos Island, which it's really a great scandal, a part of Africa that is under siege since 50 years by the US and the UK. If you know about it, and this is a crime against Africa, how is it that this is a topic that nobody speaks about? And they are going to renew the agreement between the US and the UK on this part of Africa that is occupied and made, which is now a US military base in our soil. What is not there a great crime that we too in Africa we can claim and ask the US and the international justice system to look at it? Thank you.
Thank you. The mic to VOA, then you'll go behind VOA.
Nick Long of Voice of America. Dr. Chilengi, could you just explain what is the status of the Economic, Social and Cultural Council within the AU? You say you're a civil society parliament. Who elected you? And when you say the ICC is in contravention of the Rome Statute because it shouldn't get more than 20% of its funding from one state and it gets 70% from the EU, surely you're aware that the EU is not a state?
Behind you.
Come again, your last sentence that EU is what?
EU is not a state.
Yes, Ralph Niemeyer for EU Chronicle. Just adding to what the colleague said, EU is not a state, but now we see that Brexit has a major influence on the European Union. Wouldn't that be a window for African nations to, I'm not talking about Afrixt, but to redefine the position in the way that you have outlined here? Thank you.
Send the microphone this side. Let's have some people also. Colleagues from this side.
I hope you. This question goes to you, the economic consultant from, and as well you. If Bashir, if you believe that the allegations against Bashir are not right, why can't he go and appear before ICC like we've seen Kenyatta appear?
Question. Next, please.
in Sudan. Why does the United States of America refuse to be a member of the ICC?
Thank you. Last.
Questions for VOA.
My name is Ivan Mojisha. I work with the East African. I have just one question for Mr. Chilengi. The AU has existed far before the sanctions on Sudan were imposed. And I'd like to know, these sanctions have been there for over 30 years, right? And I'd like to know a highlight of what the AU has been doing to ensure that these US sanctions against Sudan are reversed. And if there hasn't been any strong action against that, what do you suppose that the AU should be doing right now? Thank you.
Send the mic behind. We just want to take the last vague of questions so that we finalize this.
Thank you very much. I'm called Stephen Ouma from Nation Media Group. I'm also a member of the Federation of African Journalists Executive Committee. Mr. Chilengi, I remember we once attended with you a meeting in Geneva, a conference on human rights, and some of the issues that came up were related to Sudan and the ICC. Why should the ICC be arm-twisted to continuously targeting one nation, like we saw events that unfolded in Libya and culminated in the fall of a government that up to date people are suffering with no remedies? As Africans, do you think you will continue making noise and sitting back, or you should fast track the withdrawal from the ICC so that we can also be heard, that we can solve our problems like you suggest on an African court set up on African continent? Thank you.
Thank you. Are we satisfied? Okay. Let's give the floor to Dr. Joseph Chilengi. Please, you have the floor.
Thank you, moderator. The exit strategy has conditions. The exit strategy for Africa. That one, let's uphold the universality of the ICC, then we are game. That let us not begin to introduce political provisions within the Rome Statute. All right? Now, then we are game. The danger is this. If there is an amendment to the Rome Statute that the Blue Berets begin to arrest our leaders, then the Blue Berets will also not be allowed in member states. Do you understand the consequences? All right? My country, for example, cannot allow the Blue Berets because you don't know what the second agenda they are coming to do. So we are already again raping the international peace and security system by just making these wild and I may call them stupid provisions that really do not add value to the international justice system. There is state sovereignty in every, and the power to arrest within a state is the sovereignty of those states with its institutions. Okay? Unless we go first to go and arrest George Bush, if they can go and arrest George Bush now, then we would know that they're serious. But we know what their intentions are. The intentions, they are targeting certain people. Let's take Sudan, for example, and al-Bashir. Sudan and al-Bashir have collaborated with the international system on all issues that were meant to be contentious. The CPA, the referendum, the independence of South Sudan, and you see now what is happening, all those were conditions that Sudan and its leadership agreed to. That's the willing of. You can't say Sudan is supporting terrorism when the African system for combating counter-terrorism is based in Sudan. Yes, the Inter-Africa Agency which fights terrorism, its secretariat is in Sudan, working for Africa and maintaining what Africa is, and then you bring allegations. So our exit strategy has a number of constituent elements, all right? That one, let's perfect the international justice system. Two, that let's not bring in these amendments. Three, that let the UN Security Council, we know, and let me tell you now from political point of view, if there's anything some countries want to push, which they think will not pass in the General Assembly, they use the UN Security Council. So it's a backdoor, okay, because it's a backdoor. So we are very careful with all Security Council resolutions, all right? How can the Security Council made up of America, not a member, a state party to the ICC, Russia is not a member, a state party to the ICC, and all other countries who are not members, be given prosecutorial rights to refer a head of state to the ICC? What international justice system is that? Okay? And the international justice system also says when they were making these allegations that we want to refer the matter, the UN Security Council did not give al-Bashir a chance to be heard first. So what kind of justice system is that? So get us very clearly. This international justice system is constipated with a lot of nonsense that the consequences will come back to haunt us again. Many of us supported them on Gaddafi, that Gaddafi should go. Look at the country. Look at how the people are living. Is it okay to put millions of people at risk because of one person? So you take the choices. Would have kept Gaddafi, and we had had peace, and Africa, we had a very good exit strategy. I'm telling you. We had consultation, discussions with his son. I was one of them who talked to one of his children. And it was working. And then you send in people and go to bomb. So that is the issue. The status of ECOSOCC, VOA. Again, this is what Africa suffers from. There is nowhere in the world where you have a formal structured mechanism for the participation of citizens in any affair. In the UN, it's in the corridors. Civil society are in the corridors. European Union, not even closer. And all others. In Africa, an organ at the same level with all other organs. There are 5 organs. All right? Pan-African Parliament for parliamentarian, Executive Council for ministers of foreign affairs, Assembly for heads of state, ECOSOCC for civil society. Is not a perfect structure. It is. So it is an organ that sits inside. We are not in the corridors. We sit inside. We participate. If a head of state is coming to the meeting 1+2, I also go with 1+2. Is that not recognition of a people-centered process? Nowhere in the world, but no one is singing praises. How is it constituted? How are you? Who elected you? All right? ECOSOCC is made up of 150 members, civil society organization, constitute the ECOSOCC General Assembly. They are elected by civil society organizations themselves, That's why you find that elections for ECOSOCC are not in there. We're saying let people elect their own. So 2 from each member state, that is 108, are elected. Then 2 regional civil society organizations from each region, 5 regions, 10. Then 8 CSO that work at continental level, that is 8. You add that, 140 something. The chairperson of the African Union Commission has powers to nominate 6 to balance up any deficiencies, for example, disabled and ABCD. That brings the number to 150. The diaspora have 20 seats. The African diaspora have 20 seats in the ECOSOCC General Assembly. So it is a well-constituted, well-structured organ whose function is to provide advisory opinions to the union. And we do that while we are seated there. And that's why what has come from my colleague here about the island, okay, that has come from my colleague as an island. Of course, we have not seized this matter. Now he has brought it up. Be rest assured, January summit, you'll find it on the agenda through us. You'll find it on the agenda through us. That is the efficiency and effectiveness of the organ of ECOSOCC. It is where people pass through. ICC 70%, EU is not a state. I'm a lawyer myself. Okay? I'm a lawyer. Whether, whatever lawyer, but we know how to, okay? I'll give you an example. Amnesty International is an international organization. Then they said, okay, we'll have a branch in Zambia, for example, where I come from. And they say, no, register it under Zambia. And therefore, they're not part of us, you know, but they use Amnesty letterhead. The policy comes from the headquarters. They don't make their own, because if they had, Amnesty in Zambia would have said, we are against gays and lesbians. They would be fired immediately if they did that, because there is a central policy there. The EU is very clear as well. The European Union decisions, that's what has made Britain pull out. So if it was not a state, why are we crying over Brexit? Huh? Why are we crying? Because it is a state, it functions as a state, decisions are made as a state, it has delegated all its... So EU is a state. Even in the UN, they have applied that they want to be having one vote. Is that not a state? They think the same way, they act as a state, they behave like a state, they are structured like a state, although legally they are not yet on paper as a state. So they are a state in waiting and they behave like a state, and we have to agree. In terms of al-Bashir, why can't he appear? Yeah, you only appear to... If my client comes here and said, I've just been told to go to court, I've not been given an opportunity to be heard by the police that I should go to court, I'll say, don't go there. Okay? That's what we say. Don't go there until they comply with the law for calling you to come and appear. That's what a lawyer does. I will not allow my client to go and appear through a kangaroo process. The whole justice system must be respected, and I will allow my client to go and appear there because we have met the preconditions for appearing before that. This has not been the case with al-Bashir. It's just allegations and blah, 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 blah. Now the allegations are being falsified. Here, you read this. These are State Department documents. You read them that they were all false allegations meant only to get al-Bashir, maybe because he was controlling oil. Okay, and they had interest with oil and so forth. So we know that it is not really a way of addressing the impunity that Africa respects this process very well. We respect, and we are very, very cultured. Look at the EU. Let's call them Fortress Europe now. Okay? Closed all the borders against international justice system, where you allow those who are claiming asylum to enter, screen them, those that don't qualify, again using the illegal system, send them back. They close the border, they tear gassed, and no one is talking in the EU. People are dying in thousands. Kenya says we want to close the dam refugee, and therefore we are putting mechanism because the refugee is not in perpetuity. Why are you closing the What kind of double standards is that? My country hosted 1 million plus refugees in Zambia. 1 million plus. Just 400 refugees entering Europe, they had to call a summit in Malta. And when we wanted to attend, they said, oh, the room we have secured, there are not enough seats for me. There are not enough seats. We didn't know. There are only small seats. So really, let's get to Europe and make them understand that fakeness they have been living in is now coming to an end. Because when confronted with the challenges Africa was being confronted, we have the experience on refugees. Let them come to consult us. Okay? On Brexit, we have the experience. Morocco left the African Union. We have the experience on how to deal with Africa exit. So let them come and consult us. We have the experience. If they wanted to get out Bashir before a proper justice system, let them come to us. We have the Hebre case. Haven't we handled it well? How many bombs have been thrown on Hebre? No one. Okay, now we'll be convening a conference for pledging in order to create that fund as per the court ruling that the victims be compensated. We are following. That is what Africa stands for. We stand for fairness, gradual respect for each other, and so forth. Finally, 30 years of sanctions, I will give my friend here. But the most painful thing is this. If you went to give medicine to a child in Sudan as a company, they will fine you. And that money goes into the US Treasury, and they boast that they are a rich country. Okay? Children are dying in Sudan because of lack of medicine, but you are hammering millions of money on Sudanese for any company that deals with them. That money is not even donated to charity. To say this money, they are eating it. So as one child is dying in Sudan, that blood being spilled, an American is drinking tea from the same money as a result of a child who's dying. That's the most painful thing. These are things we are looking at in Africa. And we are saying, if you have a problem with al-Bashir, there is targeted sanction. Okay? Put sanction on al-Bashir and his leadership. Let the people trade freely. But you are busy killing. I met one student myself in the US. He's a Sudanese. He was doing a project, and it required soil from Africa. At the airport, because he was a Sudanese, they said, you can't even bring in the soil. Soil! They tested it, it's just soil. They said, because you are from Sudan, it can't enter America. You're under sanction. That's the kind of nonsense existing. Okay? And that's why we are saying maybe him may change things. At least if he is useless, but we know how to deal with him, we know his thinking, than the actual system that goes on it. Finally, why do we continue to make noise? If we know that the ICC and blah, blah, blah. It's politics. I'll tell you one thing. There are so many things you don't know. Africa will propose to the EU that we want to introduce aggression, which is an international crime. It's a use cogent, to be under the jurisdiction of the ICC. Europe have written in black and white, we will not support you. But ICC is a court to deal with international crime. Is it not so? Is aggression not an international crime? It is. But there is no aggressor in Africa. The aggressors are outside. And they are resisting to include aggression under the jurisdiction of the ICC. And civil society in Africa will support them. No, ICC is overburdened. We ever seen a court which is overburdened? There is no court. A crime is a crime. So this is the kind of the double standards that we're looking at, and we are watching them. Because if you look at this is called sovereignty immunity. Okay? Now, international customary law is very clear on this. What do America do? They go to a court, all right? That A state cannot be sued in a local court of another state. That's international customary law does not agree. So they go to their court and pass this to say, allow us, amend, just to get to al-Bashir. Amend this and blah, 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 in order to do this. So what we shall do also in Africa, we shall begin to amend. Yes, so that we also can begin to arrest, to take America to court at our national level. Now imagine if we were given the power in Africa, how many crimes America has committed on the continent. Hey, we will all be going to court every day to seek compensation. I'll give you
Thank you very much. I think on the issue of sanctions, the United States was claiming that Sudan is endangering the energy security of the United States. Imagine how can a least developed country in Africa endangers the energy security of the United States. That is because we have Chinese, Malaysian, and Indian oil companies exploring oil in Sudan. They want this oil to go to the United States and to be explored by their companies. They have frozen millions of US dollars assets of Sudanese individuals and not only Sudanese government money. They did not allow the IMF or the World Bank, which are international institutions. Sudan is a member, but because of the power of the United States and its effect, they cannot give loans to Sudan. Even the G8 and the G20, the European countries, because of the influence of the United States, they cannot give official development aid to Sudan. So now even we were not allowed to join the World Trade Organizations, which is an international organization, and we applied for many years, and we were eligible to be part of it. So as I said in the beginning, the United States is trying to put us under siege and to limit our movement to be like an active member integrated in the world economy. Due to this, the Sudanese economy is not functioning as usual, and most of the macroeconomic indicators are going down. Inflation is very high, rate of poverty is very high, and people are suffering of unemployment because of those sanctions. As Chilengi has said, even life-saving medicine cannot be shipped to Sudan. Many shipping lines are afraid of those penalties imposed by the United States. So this is creating many problems, and we are calling on all world countries to work with Sudan to lift those sanctions on Sudan. Thank you.
Okay, I will just, I think this has brought us to the end of this very interesting press conference. I would just like Mr. Shelba to stand, because you are the head of ECOSOCC in SIDO, and also the acting director of SIDO to stand, so that these people are very available for one-on-one interviews. You can facilitate for them if they want to meet the media. All of them are here. But right now, the Rwanda television wants to have Dr. Joseph Chilengi in their studio. It's just next door. We want to thank you for coming to this press conference. We want to appreciate colleagues, you are coming here, but don't go away. We are having a next press conference with the Commissioner for Rural Economies and Agriculture. She's already with us here. We just want to give time for the live stream team to prepare themselves. Thank you for coming. Thank you. It was a pleasure. It was really, I like that. I'm so proud of you.